in their chairs. We will be led in prayer today by Father Dan Brandt, who is with the Chicago Police Department in Chicago. Father Brandt is the guest of Representative Moylan. Members and guests are asked to refrain from starting laptops, turn off cell phones, and rise to the invocation and pledge of allegiance. Father Brandt.
Please kneel. No, I'm kidding. You don't have to kneel, friends. Thank you. It's an honor to be here today. I bring with me the greetings of 12,000 Chicago police officers whose souls I am entrusted with and whom I proudly minister to and with. Being that police work is under scrutiny this recent months, I'd like to pray for them in a special way today. Also mindful that just last week here in Springfield, we celebrated Police Memorial Week. It was a good year for Illinois because only one police officer in the last 12 months was killed in the line of duty, and that was actually due to an injury from years ago. His name is George Nissen. He's from Stone Park. And just prior to that, James Morrissey from Oak Forest, just outside of 12 months ago, was killed in an auto accident, March of 2014. So it might be fitting to begin with just a moment of silence for them. And ironically, the 118, the same number of bodies representing the state in this room, 118 of you, there were 118 police officers throughout the nation who died in the line of duty in the past year, in the year 2014. So a moment of silence, please, for them. Eternal rest grant unto them, O Lord. And let perpetual light shine upon them. May they rest in peace, and may their souls and the souls of all the faithful departed through the mercy of God rest in peace. And let us pray. Almighty God, Father of all mercies, we ask thy blessing and guidance upon all those in law enforcement, those engaged in the protection of our citizens. Be with them in their lonely tours of duty while patrolling the busy streets of our cities, as well as the remote areas of our country. Give them the blessing of your wisdom to know and do what is right. Temper their actions with mercy and justice, and when their tours are completed, guide them home safely to their loved ones. And we also ask thy blessing and eternal rest to our brothers and sisters who have sacrificed their very lives in the performance of their duties. Give to their loved ones the peace and strength to bear the anguish of their loss. Remove resentment from their hearts, knowing that eternal peace will rest and abide over all departed loved ones. And all this we beg in thy name, for you live and reign forever and ever. Amen. And the Lord be with you. And may Almighty God bless you and your work, protect you from all evil, and bring you one day to everlasting life. Amen. Representative Moylan asked if this would count for Sunday Mass, if this counts for church on Sunday. And the answer is yes, if you brought your envelope. Let's talk.
Thank you, Father. I don't think that will work for me. We'll be led in the pledge by Representative Evans. Leader Curry.
As far as I know. Thank you, Speaker. Please let the record reflect the excused absence of Representative Mautino.
Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Please let the record show that Representatives Ives and Tryon are absent today and excused.
Please take the record, Mr. Clerk. There are 114 House members present. We do have a quorum. The chair recognizes Mr. Harris.
Are you related to this Harris? They must say the same thing you were saying. I think I saved it.
Mr. Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question of the chair.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to know how the representative, the distinguished gentleman from Des Plaines, my colleague from Des Plaines, I'd like to know how he ended up with a priest from Chicago to give the invocation. I thought that was supposed to come from the legislator's district. Has the legislator violated any rule of the House that we may not know about?
I'm quite sure that the representative would admit that he violates all the rules he can. Mr. Moylan is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. His family lives in my district. As you know, the Lord is everywhere. He has far-reaching authority.
Thank you, Father Moylan. Mr. Verschoor.
A point of announcement, Mr. Speaker.
That can't be better than the last one. Go right
It won't
ahead,
be.
sir.
This Thursday, there was supposed to be a subject matter hearing in environment. That has been canceled. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Clerk.
Committee reports. Reservoir Flynn Curry, Chairperson Committee on Rules, reports following committee action check on May 11th, 2015. Recommends be adopted for the floor is Floor Number 1 to Senate Bill 1249. Approved for consideration for second reading is House Bill 1, House Bill 1190, House Bill 1192, House Bill 1193, House Bill 1286 through House Bill 1290. Approved for consideration for the third reading is House Bill 3528, House Bill 3820. Introduction of resolutions. House Resolution 471, offered by Representative Crespo. House Joint Resolution 74, offered by Representative Meyer. These are referred to the Rules Committee.
Mr. Clerk, agreed resolutions.
Agreed resolutions. House Resolution 461, offered by Representative Belloc. House Resolution 462, offered by Representative Cavaletto. House Resolution 463, offered by Representative Rice. House Resolution 464, offered by Representative Gable. House Resolution 465, offered by Representative Feigenholz. House Resolution 466, offered by Representative Phelps. House Resolution 467, offered by Representative Pritchard. House Resolution 468, offered by Representative Eunice. House Resolution 470, offered by Representative Gisel. House Resolution 472, offered by Representative Keith Wheeler. House Resolution 473, offered by Representative Clunan.
Leader Kerr moves for the adoption of the agreed resolutions. Those in favor say yes, opposed no. The ayes have it, and the agreed resolutions are adopted. Representative McDermott.
Point of personal privilege.
Proceed, please.
I want to introduce today 4 of my sisters from the Joliet Holly Club who are here today visiting our General Assembly. The Joliet Holly Club for more than 125 years has supported charities, particularly children's charities, in the Joliet area. Welcome.
Thank you. Welcome to Springfield. Mr. Stewart.
Point of personal privilege, Mr.
Proceed,
Speaker.
sir.
Thank you, sir. The members of the House today would please join me in welcoming as my pages today Callista Cray and Lydia Marks, 8th grade from the Rochester Middle School, and they're here with their Aunt Chris, who's up in the audience today. Thank you.
Hello. Thanks for being here. Mr. Meyer.
Point of personal privilege. I too
Proceed.
have 2 pages today. If the 2 young men up there in their Boy Scout uniforms from Clinton County are here, they're Justin Feich and Alex Becker. They're from Troop 225. Thank you for being our pages today.
Thank you for joining us. Mr. Moffitt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I could have the House's attention on, it's a serious matter, and it's a point of personal privilege. At 10 o'clock today, we had the annual ceremony out here at the Fallen Firefighters Memorial, and there are a lot of firefighters here and fire departments represented. Probably some will visit, and perhaps will be introduced if we notice them in the balcony. But it's a real tribute. Last week we had one for law enforcement. Today we had one for what's called the Fallen Firefighters Memorial, and then the Medal of Honor ceremony at the Prairie Capitol Convention Center. The thing that I'm so happy to report, for the second year in a row, there was no line of duty firefighter death. First time I think that's happened, but 2 years in a row. We want to keep remembering those other names that are on that monument, but thank goodness we didn't add to it last year. We didn't add to it this year, and we want to continue to do everything to help our firefighters, our law enforcement, our EMS service, any of the first responders. And if the body would indulge, if we could just have a moment of silence for all of our firefighters and other first responders who have paid the ultimate sacrifice protecting the rest of us, if we could, please.
Take a moment of silence. Thank you, Mr. Moffitt. Mr. Pritchard.
Also for personal privilege, Mr. Speaker.
Proceed, sir.
Over here with our page today, in fact, all this week will be my page, Jeremiah Catalina, who is a graduate student at Northern Illinois University, watching our session, so I hope we'll all be on the best of manners and behavior.
Thank you, and welcome to the House of Representatives. Representative Lilly,
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Point of personal privilege.
please proceed.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the General Assembly. Today is dress rehearsal for Capitol Capers. Yes, let's give that a round of applause. This evening at 5:30 at the Hilton Towers, the mezzanine level. Please come and participate in our rehearsal so we will have a fantastic show on tomorrow. There will be a yellow flyer on your desk to give you all the details. Please join us and we'll see you tomorrow at our performance of Capitol Capo. Thank you.
Mr. Cabello,
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for a point of personal privilege.
go right ahead, sir.
To piggyback off of what Representative Moffett was saying, the law enforcement works obviously very closely with our fire professionals, and I don't know if we understand the sacrifices that these folks make. And when you are gone from your family on Christmas Eve, when you're gone from your family on whichever holiday, we understand that it's not just a sacrifice of one person, it's a sacrifice of the whole family unit. So these folks are special. These folks understand that our job is to make sure that we provide a service, a professional service, both as we deal with you and as we come to your needs of the reason why you called us. So it's not a job for them either. It's a lifestyle. It's a calling that they answer. It's not something that everybody can deal with. There are calls that I would be more than welcome to talk to you about that both police and fire were at that is not appropriate for some of the audience that pays attention. Some of these professionals have to talk to other professionals after they leave a call because of something that has been done to a child or how a person passed away. So if you want a true understanding of what these folks do, please reach out to them. They will be more than welcome to tell you what they see. I will be more than welcome to tell you what we together have seen. Again, the 99th General Assembly has got fantastic folks, and I truly believe together we're going to be able to help law enforcement, we're going to be able to help the fire industry, and we're going to be able to help the people of Illinois. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Sandak,
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A point of personal privilege, please.
please proceed.
Today is Downers Grove Day here at the Capitol. I didn't know if you were aware of that, Speaker. To my left is young Maggie Clark. Maggie Clark is a 5th grader at El Sierra School in Downers Grove. She's a junior Girl Scout. She is in the choir. She plays the flute. But here's the important thing, ladies and gentlemen. She's donated 6 ponytails for wigs for kids with cancer. Kind of a big deal, right? Her mom, Jeanette's in the upper right-hand corner there behind me. Will we give the Clarks a nice welcome to Springfield, please?
Welcome to Springfield, and thank you for what you do for other children. Mr. Brady,
Point of personal privilege, Mr. Speaker.
please proceed.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, you're all invited this evening to join the Illinois Coroners and Medical Examiners Association for social time and good home cooking with our own former representative and now mayor, guest chef Skip Saviano. Will be this evening beginning around 6:30 at the home of Brian Duffy. You should have received an invite to your office. If not, please come see me for directions. Again, please join us for some great home cooking this evening beginning around 6:30.
Thank you, sir. The chair recognizes the majority leader.
Thank you, Speaker. I move the House of Representatives now resolve itself into a committee of the whole for the purposes of a subject matter hearing
on issues of tort changes in accordance with guidelines that have been established by the Speaker.
Those in favor of the lady's motion say yes, opposed no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted, and the House hereby resolves into a committee of the whole. Is there leave for the attendance roll call to be accepted for purposes of establishing a quorum in committee? Leave is granted and a quorum is established. Representative Nekritz is appointed as the chair of the committee of the whole and is recognized to conduct the hearing in accordance with the schedule established by the Speaker. Representative Nekritz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm a little mistaken. I thought this was a committee of whole on pensions today, but I'll try to do a little better than that. So the civil justice system is often the last recourse for men, women, and children who have been injured by negligence and indifference. When someone is hurt by a medical accident, a faulty product, or extreme recklessness, they should have the opportunity to present evidence in court, a court that allows every individual to stand on equal footing as even the largest, richest corporations. Each year, special interest groups spend millions of dollars to advance policies that would prevent people who have been injured through no fault of their own from being heard in court. Today, we have an opportunity to hear a side of the story that is considerably less represented. Today, we will hear from individuals who have been forced to turn to the courts to get justice. Some of them went to court because it was the only way they would be able to provide for their families after a tragedy struck. Others went because they believed financial penalties were the best way to force a large business to correct dangerous practices. Each and every one of them, however, went with the hope that their action would mean other families would not have to face the same nightmare. For some of our guests today, the courts served their intended purpose and provided them with a chance to receive redress. But for others, the policies enacted by their states meant that the outcomes they received were not enough for them to be made whole. Each of them has had to endure something unimaginable, and yet there are legislators across the country who would bar their access to the courts, claiming they are combating frivolous lawsuits, or arbitrarily limit what they need to be truly cared for and compensated, again, claiming they are making their state competitive. I believe that every member of this House has a sincere desire to ensure that people and businesses are only liable for legitimate claims. At the same time, we must acknowledge that it is the very purpose of the courts to hear those claims and disqualify illegitimate cases on the basis of specific evidence. We're all familiar with the arguments put forward by those who would restrict access to civil justice. Today, we have an obligation and an opportunity to listen to those whose voices would be silenced and understand the cost of turning our backs on irresponsible behavior. I'm going to call the first panel to the witness table. Representative Sandak.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple quick inquiries of the chair, if it'd be okay, because I don't want to interrupt the flow, and I want to hear from the witnesses. Can you tell me when the witnesses were assembled? Because we just got the agenda literally minutes ago.
I believe that the first notice I got of it was, I think, last Thursday or Friday, so in terms of the witnesses. So it's fairly recent.
Okay, but was there a reason why it wasn't shared on Friday or yesterday?
I think it's been in the final witness list. I just got it probably when you got it.
All right. Well, then another question then, because obviously we're going to hear from some victims, and I was listening with rapt attention to your opening statement. I don't think anyone's going to argue that there's a frivolous lawsuit or anyone was availing themselves of the process erroneously here. I suspect they're all grieving people that had to go to the courts and were justified in using the courts and received awards that made sense. With that in mind, however, I did notice there's no insurance representatives, business representatives, or any advocates for reasonable reforms on this agenda. Is there a reason why it's pretty it's slanted in one direction?
Representative, I would say that those individuals we hear from frequently. It's the individuals that are appearing today that we don't hear from and whose voices are not routinely represented around the Capitol.
Well, I'll accept that proposition. Of course, the trial bar lawyers are a pretty prominent and almost omnipotent force around here, so I'm not going to suggest that we don't hear from, you're not going to suggest we don't hear from them.
Yep.
But I appreciate your comments.
They're not on the list either.
No, but they're here. But thank you for answering
the
questions.
others are here.
Yes, but I just want to make for the record that this is obviously a decidedly pro-plaintiffs injured party, and I'm assuming aggrieved injured, and so I don't think you're going to hear anyone take issue with their claims and their use of the process. I'm just slightly, I just wish these were balanced and real committees of the whole, that's all. Thank you for answering my questions.
Thank you. So I'd like to call the first panel to the witness table. That would be Jennifer Hill, Crystal Bobbitt, Professor Bernard Black, and Dr. David Hyman. And whenever you're all settled in, Ms. Hill, why don't we start with you, whenever you're ready, whenever you're comfortable.
Okay, well, my name is Jennifer Hill. I'm from Huntley, Illinois. A little bit closer, like that? Okay. My name is Jennifer Hill, and I'm from Huntley, Illinois. And I wanted to thank you for the opportunity to talk about my oldest son, Ryan Hill. Oh, okay. Well, then I'm sorry for not looking at this side of the room, because the mic is this way. In 1998, I was pregnant with my first child. The pregnancy was fine until about the 34th week. At that point, I had started having signs of preeclampsia, but not diagnosed officially with preeclampsia. My pregnancy continued till 41 weeks, 5 days, and I went for a non-stress test. At that point, that test was non-reactive, which means that my son was not moving frequently as the doctor would hope. Typically, you are at 41 weeks induced that night. I was sent home and induced the next day. I was induced for more than 18 hours with Pitocin, and after an attempted water break at about noon, 5 hours into my induction, I became very ill. And I also developed a condition where I was contracting too many times within a specific period of time. And I found out during my trial that that's called tachysystole. The hospital policy is that Pitocin is stopped or at least reduced. When a woman enters tachysystole, my Pitocin was increased because I was not progressing. At a specific time, I think it was around 10:30 at night, I began to push. They attempted to deliver Ryan with vacuums and forceps, which was unsuccessful. I was told I would have a cesarean section, and then I became unconscious. I woke up on the operating table. From what my husband tells me, I was blue, my son was blue, and he was resuscitated, and I'm still here. So he was released to the regular nursery, and he started having seizures at about 13 hours, which he was not breathing through. At that point, he was admitted into the NICU, which is the intensive care unit, for 3 weeks. Throughout that 3-week period, he continued to have seizures and was put on medication. He had a CAT scan that showed brain damage at that point. At the 3-week appointment after he was released, we were told that he had suffered brain damage that affected 2/3 of his frontal lobe. Now, when going in, I didn't know what your frontal lobe does. That's the part right behind your forehead, and that's the part that helps you mature, helps you understand sarcasm, irony, that the world isn't black and white, that there are shades of gray. And so that part of his brain is gone, and it's not replaceable. My second son was born 2 years later, and it was only through going through an experience with a different doctor at a different hospital that I realized my care was completely different, and that there might have been issues with Ryan. Ryan at this point is 2.5 or 3, and his disabilities are becoming clearer at that point, and I realized that we were looking at a lifelong issue. So At that time, Ryan wasn't talking. He didn't talk until he was 3 years old, and he still had seizures. He still continues to have seizures today. He does have epilepsy. He has weakness on his right side due to the brain injury, and right now, Ryan is 16. He is doing things the doctors told us he would never do. At the 6-week appointment, we were told he would never walk, talk, eat, and he has amazed every doctor that we've seen, and we've moved a lot because of my husband's job. So, but he still has lifelong issues. He won't mature past a 10 to 12-year-old level. He's 16 years old and loves Transformers, loves Avengers. We saw the Avengers movie. And he will see a car on the street and think, is that Bumblebee? Is those Transformers real? And because he's walking and it wasn't a genetic disability, people expect your 16-year-old, who is taller than me, to come with some type of experience, and he's not able to do that. He's very naive and trusting, and would go and help someone if they said, I need help with a puppy, or so he does need to be with somebody at all times. So in 2006, after my second child was born, we decided to pursue a lawsuit, because I remember going into the attorney's office and saying, I just want to make sure that if there's a chance that something was wrong with what happened with Ryan, that my other son David won't ever have to choose between providing for his family and providing for my son once my husband and I are dead and gone. And that was the impetus of the lawsuit. It wasn't malicious, it wasn't vengeful, it was to take care of my kids and my hopefully future grandkids. So the suit claimed that the doctor unnecessarily delayed Ryan's C-section, and in 2012, a jury ruled in Ryan's favor. So prior to having our verdict in 2012, my husband had a good job. We're both college graduates, but it was paycheck to paycheck. Ryan's medicine is expensive every month. He was in 16 hours of therapy a week, and we had zero savings. Throughout that course of time, I also have a daughter, so my middle son and daughter, we have no college savings for them, even to this point. And my middle son is 14, so that's on the horizon. When we had to total up our medical costs for Ryan for the trial, the jury awarded us $128,000 in reimbursement for medical expenses. And they estimated the future cost of Ryan's care at $5.5 million, because he's a teenager and he should have a normal lifespan. Another huge challenge is getting Ryan's educational needs met. In a lot of school districts, if you come with an autistic child or a Down syndrome child, your school district has programs for those children. My son comes with a traumatic brain injury, so he fits a little bit of cerebral palsy, he has an epilepsy, he has a whole bunch of other shades of disabilities, but he doesn't fit into one box. So it's very difficult. Oftentimes I've had to ask for special programming for the school district, and I've had to become an advocate for him. Prior to our verdict, I was definitely fearful of where Ryan would live after my husband and I are no longer able to provide for him. Who will take care of him? Where will, and how would that impact my other children? A typically developing person is probably not going to marry my son, who is going to operate at a 10 to 12-year-old level for his life. So he's lost a lot because of the complications that occurred during his birth that were of no fault of his own. He won't be able to drive. He's not competitively employable. So without a verdict, his future was very bleak, which is just devastating for a parent. So overall, the verdict has secured Ryan's future and provided him, I now know as his mother, that he will always have a safe place to live. He will always have a safe person that will take care of him, And my other 2 children won't have to sacrifice their families or my grandchildren's college education because they have to pay for Uncle Ryan or provide for him. So it's been truly life-changing for us to have the verdict that we had. And I just wanted to thank you for your time, and I hope that you consider what we say here today. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Ms. Bobbitt?
Good afternoon. My name is Crystal Bobbitt, and I'm from Evansville, Indiana. And I'd like to thank you for having me come tell you my story about my little girl. My husband, Jamie, and I welcomed our firstborn in 2001, and he was born with alloimmune thrombocytopenia, which basically means low platelets. And he was in the NICU for 10 days, and he had transfusions and platelet transfusions and steroids, and he came out fine. But the doctor recommended me to go see a specialist to see why he was born with a thrombocytopenia. And after some blood work was done on my husband and I, they found that our blood types, the white blood type, did not match. So subsequent children would be having the same problem, if not worse. In February of 2003, I became pregnant with my daughter Julianne and was immediately referred to a fetal maternal specialist. And that specialist told me at my first appointment that everything would be fine. I would be placed in a study that treated the pregnancy, and she had good results with her patient from the previous year. Part of that treatment was infusions, either once or twice a week, and I was in the study group that I got them twice a week. So part of the study also was at 33 weeks I would get a procedure called a PUBS, which is sticking a needle in the umbilical cord and drawing out a blood sample. When I was admitted to the hospital for the procedure, I was told I would be awake during the procedure and would be able to answer any questions. And the last thing I remember was being in the operating room, and the next thing I remember is waking up in another room in severe pain and hearing lots of voices in the room. I called out to my husband. He came over and said that we had a baby girl. Over the next few weeks, thank you, we were concerned because the doctor would not answer our questions, and she kept saying, "I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened." And even at her 6-week appointment, I kept asking, and she kept giving me vague answers and telling me that the placenta was intact, and she still didn't know what happened. So after Julianne turned a year, some family said that we should go ask a lawyer and see if we could find out results. So we went to a lawyer, and he asked for the records for the hospital and the doctor, and found several things of concern. Number one, that during the sampling, my blood pressure had dropped to a critically low level, which caused no oxygen to go to the baby, and her heart rate dropped. The doctor was not monitoring the baby during the procedure, and when she finally did, after 45 minutes, the baby's heart rate was very low, and they took the baby cesarean. The baby, Julianne, came out black and not breathing. And they had to resuscitate her, and she was on a ventilator for 8 days, and she was in the NICU for 23 days. At 6 months, I went to a neurologist, and the doctor said that she did not have cerebral palsy, but usually it would rear its ugly head at 9 months. So we made an appointment for 9 months, and at 9 months she was diagnosed with cerebral palsy. In 2005, we filed a medical malpractice suit against the hospital and the doctor, noting that the doctor had failed to recognize fetal distress. Since Indiana law requires medical malpractice cases to go through a 3-doctor panel to decide if the case was negligent, it was a long process. We finally had our first trial in 2009, and it ended in a hung jury 5-1 in our favor. During the trial, the hospital and doctor blamed the anesthesiologist for not doing enough to elevate my blood pressure during the pub's procedure. A second suit was filed, including the anesthesiologist, and was heard in 2013. One of our expert witnesses, which was a life care planner, completed a thorough analysis on how much it would cost for Julianne to have a good care during a normal life expectancy, and the sum was $10 million. The jury excused the anesthesiologist, but found doctor and hospital were negligent and awarded Julianne $10 million for her lifelong medical care and $5 million to myself and my husband for pain and suffering. But because of Indiana law caps award, we will receive less than 10% of the amount jury awarded to Julianne and my family. Julianne will require special care for the rest of her life. She is in a wheelchair. She does not eat by mouth. She has a G-tube. She has a seizure disorder. She has scoliosis. She has respiratory problems. And she has tone and spasticity problems. Most people can't understand what we go through every day. She is a normal 11-year-old in her head, but gets frustrated when she can't do what normal kids do. The only way she can communicate is vocalizing and crying. We have a difficult time planning on any outing due to her health issues and temperament. We've had to cancel many trips, as well as missing many activities such as church, family events, and going out with friends. We dealt with a sleepless night for Julianne's first 2 years because of her cerebral palsy. Her muscles don't allow her to relax. I finally got the nerve to ask the doctor for medication, and he said yes, and so I didn't fall asleep at work. I have always worked full-time, and it has been difficult to go to all required doctor's appointments, therapy, and also leaving work for illnesses. We did find support at Riley Hospital in Indianapolis for children. They have a cerebral palsy clinic we attend every 6 months. The clinic offers a myriad of services to consult our life care plan. We see orthopedic surgery, developmental pediatrician, neurology, physical therapy, speech therapy, dietitian. The clinic caters to the parents and children with one-stop shopping, as they call it, where the consultants come to your room and you don't have to go around to the hospital. The developmental pediatrician monitors her growth rate, her diet, and her behavioral issues. The neurologist monitors her seizures and her tone. The physical therapy makes sure that the regular physical therapist is working on things that make life easier. And the orthopedic surgeon monitors her hips and her scoliosis. Because in Indiana, the absolute cap we are continuing to fight, we have to rely on other means such as the Indiana Cerebral Palsy Foundation and as well as Medicaid. We still have a difficult time having to rely on the state and taxpayers for Julianne's care. When Julianne was approximately 2, the caseworker encouraged me to fill out paperwork to qualify for waivers. And at 3.5, she was approved for the A&D waiver. This automatically places her on Medicaid for a secondary insurance. Although we've had Medicaid since she was 3.5, prior to that, we basically kept our head above water. We were paying minimum payments to all the hospitals and doctors that we were going to, and we didn't get to do anything extra. we may do. As a conservative, I don't believe the taxpayers should be paying for her care. We believe the people who have been found negligent and caused her to have cerebral palsy should be responsible for paying for her care. I'd like to tell you about Julianne. She is a social butterfly. Even though she's nonverbal, she's very vocal. If you're having a bad day, you walk into her room and she makes you smile. She loves school and she loves riding the bus to and from school. She likes being treated like a normal girl. She sits at lunch with the normal 5th grade girls and giggles, and they accept her as their own. Her teacher has expressed Julianne has been one of the most difficult students due to the fact she's okay in her head, but she's frustrated when she can't do the things that normal kids do. I have read the Constitution, and where does it say the state has the right to take away what the jury has awarded? I'm here to fight for patients. We are the little people and not the large special interest groups who have deep pockets. A patient have the right to recover what was taken from them and not have the fight for 10 years to go through the legal process for their recovery. With the cap, after we pay the lawyer's fees and pay the lien against Medicaid, our family will have next to nothing. My husband and I worry about long-term care for Julianne. What if something happens to us and we can't care for her? Private insurance has denied several pieces of equipment due to what they cover, so we have to rely on Medicaid. Her communication device costs $17,000, and the private insurance only paid $6,000. My husband and I would like to take Julianne on trips. We would like to buy her a golf cart so we could ride her around. In conclusion, you probably want to ask, why does this family need $15 million? We don't need anything. God has blessed us with a beautiful family, and we rely on Him. That being said, the doctor has taken the dream of a healthy girl away from us. She can't walk, she can't talk, she can't eat, and she can't play like normal children. They have robbed us of many things, such as my husband walking her down the aisle, watching her play soccer, or taking after her mother playing piano. She will never meet the man of her dreams, marry, and give us grandchildren. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing your story with us today. We have Professor Black and Dr. Hyman who are here to provide some perspective and some input on the impact of the state policies that led to the results today. So I don't know who cares to go first, but.
So maybe let me start. I've been working on empirically studying the effects of medical malpractice and medical malpractice reform for the last dozen years with David Hyman and with other co-authors, Charles Silver.
Professor
Williams.
Black, can you just state your name for the record, please?
Yeah, Bernard Black. Black is in the color. Sorry. With several other co-authors as well. And so I think our role is to provide perspective and some sense of, you know, if you limit medical malpractice lawsuits, what happens, but also some perspective on where we are now. Because I think my own perspective is I've had family members who have died because of medical error. More than one. My son almost died. We were lucky. We were 5 minutes from a major medical center. If we'd been 30 minutes, he would have bled to death when he was 6 weeks old. What we have to find a way to do is to learn from our mistakes and not keep making them. So David and I will testify later that damage caps aren't a solution to any problem I can think of. But the problem is our current medical malpractice system is also not a solution to any problem I can think of. We have lots and lots and lots of medical errors. Very few of them lead to lawsuits. Very few of them lead to change. And so I'm listening to the stories and thinking, Okay, I'm from Northwestern. What did Northwestern learn from your experience? What changed? We don't know. We don't know whether we learned from mistakes. Even if Northwestern learned, did anyone else learn? And so I'm groping for a system, because medical malpractice is not it, where we can learn from our mistakes. We don't keep making the same mistakes over and over and over in different places, in different hospitals, in different ways. Medical malpractice is not going to get us there. Limiting medical malpractice is not going to get us there, and we have to find another way to get there. And I'll give more specifics about how we might get there, about the problems with the current system later. We'll testify at the end of the day about the effects of medical malpractice reform as best we understand them empirically. But please understand that the current system leads to lousy quality, and medical malpractice reform, if anything, will lead to worse quality.
Dr. Hyman.
So I'm David Hyman. I'm a professor at the University of Illinois. I'm co-author with Professor Black, and we've been working together for about a decade doing empirical studies of medical malpractice. As he said, I'm just going to make a couple of brief comments that'll help frame the two cases that you've heard about already, one of which in Illinois, the other of which in Indiana. The first point is that I think both cases make clear that birth injury cases are deeply tragic for everyone involved. They're tragic for the parents, they're tragic for the children. They're also tragic for the physicians and institutions who are involved, because nobody goes to medical school and goes through what it takes to become a neonatologist or an obstetrician because they want to have this sort of thing happen on their watch. They care deeply about their patients. There are obviously some bad apples, but the bigger problem is good apples who are working in institutions that are set up in ways that don't prevent these errors, that don't learn from their past mistakes. So that's the first point. The second point is that birth injury cases are phenomenally expensive because we're talking about lifetime injuries that you end up seeing just eye-popping numbers being thrown around where even the defendants recognize they're very substantial costs. And I don't think we've come up with a system that allows us to figure out how to pay those if we don't make the defendants pay, the parents pay, or the state pays through the Medicaid program. It's just a question of how we're going to allocate those costs. The third point is that you see the difference between a state that has a cap and a state that doesn't. Indiana has a total damages cap. Illinois has obviously enacted caps on non-economic damages 3 times, only to see it struck down each time. There are differences between total damage caps and non-economic damage caps, and we can talk about that when Professor Black and I testify. Indiana also has a patient compensation fund that's administered by the state. Illinois does not. So and we can again talk about what a difference that makes. And the last point I want to flag is something that probably didn't get noticed immediately, but how long these cases take to get resolved, right? So one case, by my count, took 10 years and the other took 14 years. That's a very long time for everyone involved, for the patients who need medical treatment, for the defendants who don't know whether they're going to be liable or not and have this hanging over their heads. And it's part of the reason why nobody's all that happy with the existing medical malpractice system. It's slow, it's expensive, and it's perceived as inhumane by everyone involved. Thank you.
I don't have any members seeking to ask questions. So with that, Ms. Hill and Ms. Bobbitt, we really, again, are very great. Oh, I'm sorry. If you could wait just a minute. Representative Mussman. She's going to be over here to your right.
Thank you. So thank you, all of you, obviously, for being here and sharing such personal stories. You know, I wanted to get a little bit more of a sense with Mrs. Bobbitt especially. What is your day-to-day life like right now? What kind of services does your daughter receive? If you're at work, how are you kind of getting through?
We have to get Julianne. Hello? Is it on? We have to get Julianne on the bus about 7 o'clock in the morning, And it takes probably about 45 minutes to feed her, clothe her, and breathing treatments, medicine. And then she goes to school all day. And then when she gets home off the bus, the nurse gets her off the bus and takes care of her until I get home from work. And then the evening bath, everything is times 100 with her. If she gets sick, she gets worse than everyone else. Bath time takes an hour because she's full care. She really kind of works against you because she's ornery. She does have a diva-like personality. I don't know where she gets it. But it's just an all evening. I have a hard time keeping up with everything.
Is there a way that you feel like your day-to-day life would be different had your damages not been capped?
Well, I probably wouldn't work full-time. I would still work because I like my job, but we would have more nursing care, and we also would be in a more functional house. We do still have a hard time with the bath time. It did get modified, but it's just not working for her right now. Those are things that we have to worry about all the time. And also, the house that we are in, she's on the first floor, I'm on the second floor, and so I don't know what she's doing.
Are there ways, based on your experiences and talking with other families, can you kind of get a feel for how these cash limits affect other families, including yours?
I haven't spoken with anyone that has gotten a verdict like we have. I do know that I do have a network of special needs friends, and everything is costing exponentially. Like her bath chair, you know, you think it's a piece of plastic, but it was $1,500. Those are things that we have to take care of and get things. Even though Medicaid takes care of it right now, I have to go through 6 months of paperwork. If I just ordered it right out, I could get it next week. Those are the things that are very costly, and they add up.
Right. Thank you. Again, I really appreciate it.
Representative Clunan.
Thank you. Over here. This is for Jennifer Hill, and thank you for coming today. Can you describe what type of day-to-day care that your son receives now?
Sure. He's in a Huntley High School, but is in special education classroom. And he's a junior in high school, so, a sophomore. So you're talking, he's starting to look at transitioning. So a lot of what his educational programs will be, day in, day out, will be about education and transitioning him to a job placement center where he can potentially work as a bagger at a grocery store or something that he could do. Day in, day out, my main concern is his seizure disorder. It is active, and my husband travels for work, and so I stay home because someone has to be home to get him off the bus. There are often times at night that I don't sleep because I hear him creaking or just going to the bathroom, and I wonder, is this the next seizure? Because every time he grows, he outgrows his medicine's dose. He's at the top of both of the medications he's on, so we're sort of hoping, the neurologists were playing this game with the medicine, that hopefully he won't have another seizure until he grows enough more, and then we can up the medicine. Otherwise, we would be looking at more extensive medical procedures for him.
Okay, thank you. And can you tell me what you perceive his medical care to be like had you not been able to live in Illinois and have the settlement that you have for the future, for when you and your husband are no longer around?
Yeah, I think for the future, the thing that I walked away from the courtroom knowing is that my child will be taken care of into his adulthood for the rest of his life. As a parent, I know my other two children will grow up, they'll get jobs, they'll have families, hopefully, and they will be safe and secure and have people that love them, that take care of them. For Ryan, that is all insecure. For any special needs child, that's an insecure future. When I walked out knowing that we had a verdict in our favor, his housing will be paid for, and I won't have to be on a group home list for years, which is Illinois' group home list is years to get into a group home. I won't have to worry that where his bills are being paid for, and that my husband and I don't have savings throughout the course of our life, that my other two children will have to assume those costs when we are dead. So that is what the verdict gave to me and for Ryan. It's just security and safety and peace of mind, which I wish you had.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Representative Flowers.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would like to take this opportunity to thank each and every last one of you for coming here today to testify on behalf of what has happened in your life in regards to medical errors. And I want to say to you that years ago, we've passed legislation for hospitals to report their medical errors. And doctor, we did not want them to leave those mistakes that they found out about. We did not want them to leave it on the shelf. We wanted them to read and talk about the medical errors. We wanted them to learn from their mistakes. And that was part of the problems in the very beginning. There was the don't ask, don't tell, and the one doctor didn't want to tell on the other. But in the meantime, it was the families that were suffering. And as family members, I know if you had your choice, you would not have wanted to sue. What you wanted was a healthy baby in each and every incident. And the average person that goes to a hospital, we have all the faith and trust in our doctors. But just like this body and every other place of business, no one person is perfect, and there's some bad apples. And as a result, those bad apples needed to be weeded out. And that's, again, one of the other reasons why we passed the medical errors law in the state of Illinois. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Representative Moffett.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the panel, I do thank you for sharing your situations and explaining what you're dealing with. To the first two ladies there, I really the strength that you're showing to tell the story is very, very touching. We have 3 healthy children that are adults, but now we're getting grandbabies, and I'm relating to the situations. Not that we've faced what you did, but the concern going into that. Have a specific question though for Professor Black, and I want to respect everyone's privacy. I just have a question, and maybe you told us everything you care to tell, but you were mentioning, I believe, your son, and if I heard you correctly, you were lived within 5 minutes of a hospital, and I thought you said he nearly bled to death. Is that correct? And I don't want to ask anything you don't want to go any
No,
further.
that's right. This is my second son, Ben, and he had what's called an intussusception, which is the colon collapses on itself when he was about 6 weeks old. This led to several days of cramps, and basically you need surgery to correct it. He started spotting his diaper red. It was blood. My wife took him to the Palo Alto Medical Clinic. The doctor said, it's just the Tylenol, take him home, he'll probably be fine in a day or two. He started gushing blood out of his butt about a half hour later. We were 5 minutes away from Stanford Medical Center. He was able to get transfused, and he survived. And I think if we had been a half hour away, he would not have.
Okay, thank you for that clarification, because at first you didn't give that much detail, and it was almost like it was a response time might have been the problem, but really it was not treating what the real problem was, is apparently what you're saying.
Yes, that was the medical error.
But,
yes.
Because you live close, you were able to get back in time, I believe is what you're inferring. I thought maybe it was a problem with response of emergency, and we're always trying to improve that too. Thank you.
Representative Kifowit.
Thank you, and thank you, panel. This is a question for Jennifer Hill and Crystal Bobbitt. Just in a nutshell, and I was thought of this by the statement that Crystal made, and I appreciate that, because you said those responsible should pay and not the taxpayers. Can you give me an idea of how your lives are impacted by government subsidy, and we're comparing one particular instance where an award was made and one where it's not, and so how is your dependency on government services affect your life and pretty much your daily activity, and how does not having or limits on government services affect your lives as well in that regard?
I actually have an answer for that. We go through a lot of paperwork to get anything, and one thing in particular was last year, I had go through my annual review of Medicaid, and even though she's on the waiver program, so it doesn't look at income, I still have to qualify, and I put that in air quotes. So I had to send my paperwork, and I was denied nursing services, and they claimed that she didn't qualify for nursing care and only could get 1 hour of nursing care to feed her, because it's required by Medicaid, a G-tube has to be at least an LPN, and then the rest of the time it would be just a caregiver stay with her. And it would be a nursing agency's nightmare to schedule 1 hour of nursing care and then the rest of it caregiving care. So we appealed it, and my nursing agency found that they had miscommunicated some clerical errors and found that they misdid my claim. So right the day before the judge, they looked at it again and approved the nursing care. And I honestly don't know what we would have done. Probably one of us would have had to quit our jobs. And then we would have been in poverty even more because one of us couldn't work. So amazingly, it's the paperwork and the time consuming with Medicaid.
And how much of your services are Medicaid? Are all your services Medicaid now, or
no? I have private
insurance?
insurance, and that usually covers about 80%, but the Medicaid does pick up the rest.
So in contrast.
Sorry, I can't.
That's okay. In contrast, Ryan, when you get a jury verdict, it doesn't just come into our bank account. It goes to a guardianship trust, where we go to court and a judge has to approve every expense that comes out for Ryan. And so, we can't just decide, oh, Ryan wants a boat, because, it does have to be linked to Ryan's care. So, but we can just go to a judge and request that when he turns 18, because he can't be home, he can't live on his own, can we make an apartment for him in our basement that would have a seizure alarm, that would give him some sense of independence, because he is an 18-year-old boy, but also be in the confines of my home where he's not cooking. And all I have to do is go to a judge. And his medical care is completely paid for. So it's a completely different situation. If we didn't have a verdict, I would be applying for Medicaid for him, because he's turning 17. So that application process starts. I would be applying to the state of Illinois for care, because all of my other special needs friends are applying for their children.
So all your costs are covered?
All of my costs are covered, and we are not dependent on the state at all.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you again, Ms. Hill and Ms. Bobbitt. We really appreciate your being here and sharing your stories and participating in your government. So thank you. That's all the questions we have for you. Okay. So Professor Black and Dr. Hyman, if you can stay where you are, and I'd like to ask Molly Akers and Linda Reynolds to come up to the witness table. Welcome to the Illinois House of Representatives. could just, Ms. Akers, why don't you start? If you can just identify yourself for the record. Welcome, thank you.
My name is Molly Akers. Thank you so much for having me here today. And thank you so much for inviting everyone else here to share our stories on how a medical mistake has changed our lives. Because trust me, it has. And unfortunately, none of us asked for this job to help educate lawmakers, the public, our friends, some of our family members who lived it with us for this job. But we have it, and we have accounts, stories, good days, bad days, and everything to share with you that hopefully can help you understand as well. 10 years ago, I came to Springfield when there was legislation on the floor, and at the time, I remember I didn't really know much what was going on, but I can tell you that 10 years later, I have a lot more to share with you. I've lived through a lot more, and again, thank you for allowing me to help continue my story. Because real lives are being affected with very tragic outcomes. And to us living this nightmare, it's anything but frivolous. And truthfully, it's unreasonable and unrealistic to think that anyone is above a medical mistake, even you. Again, my name is Molly Akers, and my story began in December of 2004, when I was diagnosed with a rare neck cancer called synovial sarcoma. As if being diagnosed with cancer isn't scary enough, I was then also falsely diagnosed with breast cancer and had an unnecessary mastectomy due to a mislabeling in the pathology lab. Yes, one of my biopsy slides was switched with those of a woman who did have breast cancer. She was given my negative diagnosis, and I was given her positive one. The thing that's pretty crazy about this situation, other than the obvious, is I knew it. You see, when I was first diagnosed with cancer, I knew it in my soul. It sounds cliche, but it's true. So initially hearing you have cancer was a numbing experience, but I was prepared. I felt it in my gut from day one. And anyone who has a cancer experience knows what's next. Tests, biopsies, scans, and a whole lot of fear. So my journey started. And in the process of staging me, I had to have a biopsy on one of my lymph nodes that lit up under my arm during a routine scan. None of my doctors were nervous at the time because sarcomas don't travel to your lymph node. So I was told I just needed to do this biopsy to rule anything out, but not to worry. So on my birthday, back in 2005, I traveled to the breast center for a needle core biopsy and then headed home. One more test, one more day of worry and waiting for results. The next day, I was in my kitchen and I got a call from my doctor telling me great news, or so I thought. My sarcoma did not travel to my lymph nodes, but I instead had breast cancer too. My immediate response was, and I remember standing in the kitchen looking at my husband saying, no way. But I was told I did and that we needed to start finding out where the real cancer was. So my journey continued. 6 weeks later, after breast MRIs, ultrasounds, colonoscopies, I lost count of how many tests I had to find my breast cancer. I was told by my medical team that a primary tumor could not be found and that a mastectomy was recommended to do just that, locate my breast cancer. So on February 2nd, 2005, I did just that. I had my right breast removed along with 24 lymph nodes. Again, anyone who's had a cancer experience knows how the post-testing, post-surgical result days go. So for me, I got home after my surgery and waited to hear about my results. A day went by, no call. Day 2, no call. So I started calling my doctor's office because I knew the system now. I began stalking. What were my results? Where's my cancer? Nothing for days. I was so confused and terrified and didn't understand why nobody was calling me back. Then my nurse calls me and informs me that I need to come in tomorrow, that the doctor wants to speak to me in person. Again, anybody who's had a cancer experience knows what that feeling is. I remember not sleeping at all that night and waking up the next day to get what I was thinking was dire information. Molly, get your affairs in order, that type of message. I had babies then, a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, and the thought of me not being there to see them was devastating. That, along with everything else, was streaming in my head and kept me up all night. So the next morning I woke up and went to the doctor's office with my mom. There are things in life that you can't really remember before and you can't really remember after, but we can remember vividly when that's happening. Well, that was that day for me. I recall sitting in the doctor's office and the door opening and my surgeon walking in, bawling in tears. I felt this fear come over me, like a black fear that you can't even imagine. And I recall looking over at my mom, thinking, get your affairs in order. Oh my gosh, my mom's gonna have to see me die. But as the doctor began speaking, I couldn't believe what I was actually hearing. She was going on and on about procedures, post-surgical testing, and honestly, I really wasn't following what she was saying. It didn't make sense. So she then turns to me, looks at me, tears in her eyes, and says, Molly, what I'm telling you is you never had breast cancer and you had an unnecessary mastectomy. So now what do you want to do? I remember sitting there and I was so relieved. At first, I don't have breast cancer? Yes. But then I was confused. Well, what do I want to do now? Shouldn't you tell me? I already have one cancer that's been untreated for 6 weeks. Shouldn't you be telling me what I should do? So I immediately began my treatment, and in May 2005, after 6 rounds of chemo, 7 weeks of radiation, and a couple more surgeries, I was deemed cancer-free from my synovial sarcoma. Life is a combination of experience and perspective, and back in 2005, I was clueless as to how important it was to protect our rights when a medical error happens, but I quickly have learned how vital of an issue this is. In May of 2005, shortly after I finished my chemo, like I said, I traveled down here to Springfield to address lawmakers regarding legislation on medical mistakes. I remember that day being told I was in for a crash course in civics, and I knew that something big was about to happen. And I realized there was a lot to discuss, and I was going to be asked a lot of questions about what happened to me. I remember answering what, but not the how much my life would be affected and how much legislation on medical mistakes would mean to me. I had not lived through the how yet. I was still dealing with getting better at that point, and there was so much more to come. And like I said, 10 years later, I'm here today to be able to fill in all the blanks on how much a medical mistake changes lives, because it does. See, to many it's a concept and a debate, but to us it's our lives and it's personal. We are the faces about what's debated here. And if I would have known then what I know now, there's so much more I would have been able to say back in May of 2005 to further illustrate how unfair it is to simply label patients as being careless and to blame for so many of the problems is in healthcare. More importantly, it is inhumane and cold to describe to what happened to us as frivolous. What if you were me, or your daughter was me, or any of these stories that you're hearing today was your family? How would you feel? How would you be able to handle not being able to tell your story? Because if you're going to be someone who takes such a hard stance and such a hard opinion on capping medical mistakes, then it better be a pill you can swallow yourself if it happens to you too. But when horrible things happen to us, when it's happening to us as the patient, we can't get hung up on the why too much, because we have to deal with the now what. However, for me, I wish I would have known how many unnecessary surgeries I would have to fix the mistake, or the number of hours I would spend in physical therapy. I wish I would have been able to see how terrified my then 3- and 5-year-old children would be seeing me in pain while watching their father help me with my hair or help me out of bed. I wish I would have known how scared my mother was the day we were called into the hospital simply to be told I just didn't have breast cancer. We both thought I was being called in to be told I was dying, that I only had weeks to live. I wish I'd known my husband used to break down at a friend's house because he didn't want to see me cry. I've missed a number of children's soccer games, guitar concerts, school activities, school outings, recovering from breast surgeries. All memories I'll never get back. And as if the physical and emotional hurdles were not enough, there's so much more I didn't know back in 2005 that was getting ready to slap me in the face. I had no idea. I wish I would have known how hurtful it was going to be listening to the hospital's attorney make me feel like I did something wrong, that I was okay simply because I looked normal. He had no idea how much rehab I had done, how painful it was, everything I had been through on top of what I needed to do just to beat my own cancer. That alone is horrible. He didn't know that I looked okay because I had to in order to get through a day. Being tougher than your injuries is what saves us. There's no room for fear when trying to survive a nightmare, but they can't see that in a 1-hour deposition. It's impossible. I had no idea I was going to be treated like I did something wrong. I didn't. In fact, I was the person holding my sobbing doctor's hand when she told me about the mistake. And I remember I kept asking her, "Are you okay?" Never mind that they kept me thinking for days that I had 2 different cancers and that I was getting called in there that day to tell me I was dying while the hospital got themselves organized. What about me? I was terrified. I did not know how sad and scared I would be listening to one of my longtime doctors look at me as if he'd never seen me before while he was testifying that my life expectancy wasn't that of a normal person, and therefore the true value of my life should be taken into consideration. 10 years later, despite that testimony, my life expectancy, I'm still here. I beat my real cancer, and if you were to ask my children, they greatly value my life. There's nothing frivolous about how many times they had to see me with stitches all over my chest. I'll never forget the first time I saw myself in a mirror after the mastectomy, and the fact I had to hold my crying daughter and console her when she saw that too. That's something I'll never forget. There's nothing frivolous about that. And I wish I would have known that there would be a day when my oncologist looked at me and told me that obviously they failed me as an institution and that I should go elsewhere for my care. I could go on and how much a medical mistake has changed my life. It's affected my life every day in one way, shape, or form, and still does 10 years later. In fact, I had to have another surgery in the November of 2014 because my implant rotated on the right side and it was pretty painful. Just a few months later now, it's rotated again, and I'm sitting here with some pain because of it, and it's something that I'm gonna have to fix again. Another breast surgery. Truthfully, I've actually lost count on how many corrective surgeries I've had, and that number will continue rising the rest of my life because breast reconstruction is not a quick fix. And if any of you have ever had breast cancer or have known somebody with breast cancer, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Rebuilding a woman's breast post-mastectomy is a very long, painful, and emotional process. Definitely not frivolous. However, what I hope you understand today is, and I know it's confusing and for the outside to really understand how our lives have changed. We don't and sometimes can't talk about our ordeals often. For many of us, it's beyond rough reliving things. And many times we're so busy trying to get better and deal with how our lives have changed, we don't have the time and the energy to fight this fight too. But we need you to really understand the gravity of the issue here. And personally, I'm here to remind the people whose lives are forever changed by a medical mistake that they matter and what happened to them matters too. And that automatically telling us that the value of the mistake, it's the nightmare, is cold and wrong. I could have chosen to be cold and wrong with what happened to me, but I decided I wouldn't and I couldn't allow for people in my shoes to be punished for something that happened to them too. I'm not crying victim, in fact, quite the opposite. I actually spend my days working for a surgeon who rebuilds women's breasts after breast cancer because I understand how losing one is. There's nothing frivolous about that. I've chosen to still dedicate my time and my life to this cause because it's something I believe wholeheartedly in. There's so many different roles we play in life, but we are all patients at some point. And maneuvering through the medical world can be confusing and scary at times. I know. So I believe in being a smart patient and actively involved in our care is a must. But I also believe that we, the smart patients, deserve smart medicine and to be treated like we matter, and that sometimes things go incredibly wrong. Placing all of the ownership on us patients is unfair, and the belief that restricting our rights is the best way to limit costs for all of us is unreasonable and hurtful. And yes, there's a lot of great medicine and people working in the medical field. In fact, I have some of them now, not only who have been horrified of what's happened to me and some of the stories I've shared with them over the years, but also how we are all treated. They don't blame me, but instead they have seen what have happened to me and made changes in dealing with their own patients. In fact, the head of a pathology department in a hospital near Cincinnati changed their hospital's protocol as a result of what happened to me in order to have the safest process possible. But unfortunately, as many necessary steps to ensure our safety, medical mistakes happen. And God forbid, when something goes wrong, all of us, we the patients, we matter, and we deserve to be treated as so. I realize there's a lot of statistics and rhetoric and needed reform, but taking away our rights is not the magic answer. I hope others never have to learn the way like all of us have had to. But I'd imagine that if it happened to you, you would want your rights protected. This debate has gone on in our state for years, and I still don't even understand why we're talking about it. As you hear all of these stories today, trust me, they will break your heart. I've met so many people and families over the years whose lives will never be the same simply because something simple went wrong. I've met families who are now on state aid just as a result of a simple mistake. Further, punishing everyone by taking away our rights is cold and wrong and definitely not what we deserve, especially for the families whose mistakes fall in the years when there are caps. How fair is that to them? If changes need to be made, please make fair ones that will last and that are humane. This back and forth is unreasonable and profoundly affecting the lives of those who no longer need punished for something they didn't even do. You know, my family had this family picture taken back in November of 2004. And I often look at that picture thinking to myself, wow, that person in the photo had no idea what was coming around the corner. But 10 years later, I do. Remember, every one of us is a patient and none of us is above a medical mistake. Patients matter and we all matter. Thank you so much for your time, your empathy, your compassion, and your care to do the right thing.
Thank you. Ms. Reynolds?
Hi.
You might need to move the microphone a little bit closer. That's okay. Thank you.
My name is Linda Reynolds. I'm from Holden, Missouri, and I'd like to thank you too for allowing me to come here to share my story with you on what has transpired in my life in the past 10 years. I was in 2003, I noticed that I had a hard mass, a hardness in my left breast. I went to my primary care doctor, told the concern that of my hard mass that was in my breast. And she ordered, I had never had a mammogram done yet, and she ordered a mammogram to have it checked out to find out what was the problem. She said it probably wasn't anything to worry about. I had breastfed my child. I had had a daughter at age 41 and had just got done breastfeeding. And she said it was probably nothing to worry about, but we needed to have it checked out and make sure it was okay. I went into the medical imaging. I went to the place to have my mammogram, and when you go in and have a mammogram done, they give you a sheet that you fill out, and they want to know all about your history. My mother had breast cancer. I filled out everything about my mother. My history, it wants to know if you have a problem or not. I had a problem. It has a diagram even that you're supposed to outline where the problem is and what it is that you're feeling and what you're concerned about. I expressed that on the sheet that I had a hard mass that was very large in size and that I was very concerned about it, didn't know what was going on. They did a mammogram. They came back a few days later and they told me they needed me to come back in for a follow-up, for a close-up. And I thought, okay, we're going to find out what this problem is. But they told me it was a close-up on the right side, on the right breast. And I questioned them. I said, why is it on the right breast? Because the left breast is the one that I marked that I have the hard mass in. They said, we have to do whatever the paperwork. They said that something looks suspicious in the right side, and I needed to come in and do that. I did that. They came back a few days later, and they said, everything's fine. I said, everything's fine. What about, okay, the right side's fine, but what about the left side? You know, what about the mass that I've told you about? I even had the technician feel it herself. And she said, yes, there is a mass there, but I have to go by what my paperwork says, and it says just to do a drop on the right side, and we've given you the okay on it. So my doctor was notified. They told me to come back in 1 year for a mammogram, that everything was okay, everything was fine. I was rest assured I still was uncomfortable, but I thought they know more about it than I do because they're professionals. I came back a year later in 2004, August of 2004, had my mammogram done, and did the same thing, filled out the sheet, told them I still had this hardness, still was concerned about it, wasn't sure what it was. They told me, let's go ahead and do the mammogram. I did the mammogram, and they told me not to get dressed, that they wanted to make sure the films were clear, and they didn't need to do a close-up or anything else. They came in immediately and told me about that they needed to do an ultrasound. Well, you know, when they're wanting to do an ultrasound, there's probably a problem they're detecting. The doctor came in, they did the ultrasound on my left breast. Immediately, they told me not to get dressed, that the doctor on call would be in to talk with me. The doctor on call came in and talked with me and informed me that there was a major concern, and I needed to have a biopsy done. They scheduled, it took 2 weeks for the biopsy to be scheduled and to be done. And I can't tell you the terrifying things that go through your mind in those 2 weeks' time, not knowing what is going on and having to wait. I had the biopsy done. It ended up being on a Friday, so I had to wait another 4 days just to get the notification of the outcome of it. It was September 21st, 2004, and that's a date that will stay in my mind for the rest of my life, because that's when I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I was told at the time, I didn't feel like I just went in for a mammogram. You normally think a mammogram is a mammogram. I was not aware that there is 2 different types of mammograms that are to be done. When I saw my doctor, when he told me I had breast cancer, he told me I had to see an oncologist. I set up with an oncologist. The mass that was in my left breast was so large that they had to do chemotherapy first in order to try to shrink it before they did surgery on me. This was a very traumatic thing for me. I was still I had a 4-year-old little girl, a 13-year-old boy, and a husband that was just terrified. Didn't know what to expect going in with chemotherapy, how it was going to affect me, what was going to happen, how it was going to affect my life. Chemotherapy is not a picnic. It's not a picnic at all. You go in, and that year for Christmas, I couldn't be around other family members. I couldn't be around friends, because my levels were so low that it endangered my life on being able to be around anybody if they had a little cold or anything. So I had chemotherapy first, and then in February of 2005, the doctor asked me if I wanted to try to save my breast, part of my breast, which I'm a woman. The first reaction was, yes, possibly I'd like to. They went in and they tried to save it. They came back 3 days later, said that the breast was full of breast cancer, and I had to have a mastectomy on the left side, which they took my breast off on the left side. After I went through recovery, I was ordered to do radiation treatments. The radiation treatments were 33 treatments every single day until it was completed. Halfway through this time, I developed what you call lymphedema. I had 18 lymph nodes that were removed, and 14 out of the 18 were all cancerous. That labeled me as a stage 3B, which if it's over 4 lymph nodes, then you're a B rating. You're getting close to the terminal mark. I went in, and they had to stop radiation because my burning was severely, and I had to start lymphedema treatments. I went through lymphedema treatments for several months. I had to go back on chemotherapy, and I continued with chemotherapy and being checked, just having checkups, checking me. I have come through considerably, and that was in 2004. What happened to me, that I went into a remission for like 8 years. I went in for my treatments every 3 months. I get checkups, which is blood works. they have what you call a marker to see, they check on the cancer cells. If the marker goes up, they know something is activated or something's going on. My cancer doctor told me that, she said, Linda, I need to tell you something. I want you to be strong, and I want you to get through this, which I am strong, and I'm positive, and through the Lord, I got through this so far. That she said, I need to tell you, we can only treat it. We can't cure it. Your cancer will come back, and your cancer will take your life. That is something I have to live with every single day of my life. I have to feel that I don't know what's going to happen one day to the next. In 2005, a lawsuit was filed of medical malpractice because it was found out my girlfriend was an attorney that I graduated with, and they found out that in 2003, when I went in for a mammogram, it was a screening mammogram. A screening mammogram is strictly a mammogram for someone that has no issues, no problems. It's just a checkup. The second time in 2004, a proper one was done. It was a diagnostic one, which is where the doctors actually look at the films. The doctors actually, they do a close-up to the area that you're complaining about, saying that you have a problem with. I was so upset, not just upset, but hurt that someone had made a mistake on me and did just a screening one when I clearly had marked it that I had a major problem, a major size mass that was hard. And they were negligent in the way of they did the wrong type of screening. That has changed my life forever. This year's time, between 2003 and 2004, that cancer grew in me. That cancer is a fairly aggressive cancer, and it grew into my lymph nodes. Currently, I am under chemotherapy treatment. My cancer did return. It returned in 2013, June of 2013. I have been battling through chemotherapy since October of 2013. The chemotherapy works for a while, maybe 3 months, and then it stops working, and they have to switch me to another chemotherapy. And I've been going through this, and I just had treatment last Friday, and I'm currently going through treatment for this at this time. They're having problems getting things to be under control with my cancer marker. It continues to go up. Your cancer marker is actually not supposed to be over 38 in the number, and mine is 2,735 right now. My life has changed so much because 1 minute to the next, if you have a cough, if you get a headache, no matter what might affect your life, the first thing that pops into your mind is this the cancer? Is this the cancer? It's gone somewhere else. Because it was entered so many lymph nodes, they told me the cancer cells are in me somewhere. And they can travel to wherever. It's in my bones and in my liver right now. I was very active. I used to be a teacher at Bible schools. I used to be a teacher at school. I'd like to go out and do things with my kids. I'd like to have fun. I've developed, after the lymphedema and the carpal tunnel, which I cannot have surgery on because it's on my lymphedema side, I have developed a neuropathy from my chemotherapy. And it's in my feet and my legs and my hands. That's why I'm currently using a cane. They have me under medication to try to help me with the pain and deal with it. Pain is part of my life. It's going to be a part of my life from now on. I feel that my judgment I was given a 4.5 million judgment, and that because I was in Missouri, I was capped at 600,000. The jurors come up to me after they gave me the verdict, and every single one of them voted in favor of this award. They gave me hugs and told me how they would be praying for me. That touched my life so much to know that they cared. They felt like they were helping me. I wanted that money to be able to take care of myself, to be able to take care of my burial arrangements, take care of my family, to make sure my kids were taken care of, my husband was taken care of. But they took it all away from me when they capped it, and they made my lawsuit my fault. They tried to blame me for the whole thing. They tried to say, well, if you were so concerned about it, why didn't you get a second opinion? You must not have filled the paperwork out right. You must have done something wrong that this whole thing, happened. It's not their fault, it's your fault. You should have followed up better. I didn't do anything wrong. I'm the victim here. I didn't do anything wrong. The main thing I guess I did wrong was I trusted them. I trusted them with my life. When they told me that I was okay in 2003, I trusted them. And I came back like they told me to in 2004 and had the mammogram done. But then when the lawsuit was filed, my paperwork disappeared that identified where I had marked that I had a problem. A lot of my paperwork disappeared when the lawsuit appeared. Now, I feel that money was money that was due me because they did something wrong, not me. They did something wrong, and when you do something wrong, you have to be accountable for your actions. Maybe it was a mistake, okay, but you still have to be accountable for your actions. My life will never, ever be the same. I don't know if I'll be around for my 15-year-old to graduate from high school. I don't know if I'll be around to see her get married. The things as we in life look forward to our grandkids, we look forward to being able to go out and live life to the fullest, to do things that we want to do. Watch our children grow up, or watch our grandchildren grow up. Do things with our kids, be involved. My parents lived to be in their 80s, and I sort of anticipated that maybe I could do that too. But because of this situation and this mistake, I don't think that's going to happen. They're treating me, but they can't cure me. So I'm saying that don't judge all of us, all the cases by, I don't like the word frivolous lawsuit. They labeled me as a frivolous lawsuit. Is my life frivolous? I don't think my life is frivolous. If they were in my situation, I don't think they would feel that way. But it's important that we need to protect it. If my story can help one person, that's what I want. And I am thankful for that. I once again thank you all for your patience, your time, and listening to my story. And just, I hope you remember that we're not just a name on a piece of paper. We're real people. We're victims. We're real people that's gone through traumatic things in our life. And we need people to listen and understand and not judge us and not throw us in a category with everybody else. Look at each case and say, what has happened in this? I want to hear. I want to see what happened in this person's life. But I just want to thank you for your time and for listening. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Black?
So some reactions. First, I think there's a pervasive myth that many or most medical malpractice lawsuits are frivolous, whatever that means. It seems to mean that they lose. And I think it's a myth. If you start from the perspective that the plaintiff's lawyer only makes money if the case wins, they have lots of incentives to screen out bad cases. And they do. What do we know about the aggregate number of medical errors and number of lawsuits? Here's what we know. We estimate, it's a crude estimate, but it's the best we've got, that we're killing around 100,000 people a year in this country through medical error, and another 100,000 through hospital-acquired infections. We can't bring those numbers to zero, but we know how to bring them way down. Out of that 100,000, maybe 4,000 people are killed every year in Illinois by medical errors, and that's not counting the serious injuries. And we have about 200-something paid medical malpractice claims a year. So 1 out of 20, fewer than that if you realize that there are not only 4,000 deaths, there are other injuries. That number is consistent nationwide. It's been known for a long time. Most medical error doesn't lead to a lawsuit. Most serious medical error doesn't lead to a lawsuit because the facts aren't clear enough. The evidence on medical error doesn't come from lawsuits, it comes from review of medical charts. There's a lot of medical error out there. Are there some weak cases that are brought? Sure. Are there some cases that start out where the plaintiff's lawyer thinks there was a major mistake and discovers in the discovery process, you know, I really don't have that strong a case, and drops it? Yes, there are those cases. And the doctor is convinced I should never have been sued in the first place. But many of you are lawyers, and you know, look, litigation is a messy process. You don't always get it right away. Are there many really weak cases that make it beyond an early stage? As best we can tell, no, there aren't. They don't all win, but the ones that make it beyond an initial discovery stage are usually accompanied by serious evidence that something went wrong. We then go into this process where we blame the doctor, and the doctor, as you've heard, blames the patient. And what we don't do is say, what were the systems in place that allowed this error to take place? And what can we do so that these kinds of errors don't happen again? So are there best practices in making sure that pathology slides aren't mixed up? Yes, there are. Do all hospitals follow them? No, they don't. Are there best practices in ensuring that when you do a mammogram, you do it on the breast you intend to do it on? Sure. Do all hospitals follow them? No, they don't. Are there best practices to make sure that sponges don't get left in your body during surgery? Yes, there are. Do most hospitals follow them? No, they don't. Do more than a fraction of hospitals follow them? No, they don't. This is a clear case where this is what's called a never event. It should never happen, and we know how to stop it from happening. But the hospitals aren't trying hard enough. And so what I want to take from these stories is, how do we work on the systems to stop the mistakes from happening and get away from blaming the technician who said, oh, it's in the paperwork, I have to do what's in the paperwork. The problem was with the system. How do we get away from blaming the patient for why didn't you follow up more aggressively? Because we shouldn't have to go there in the first place. Thank you.
Dr. Hyman.
Yeah, just a couple of quick points. The first is these two cases illustrate an important phenomena, which is that most cases are settled. So far, we've seen 3 cases that involved verdicts and only 1 settlement. But the reality is, in cases that close with payment, the overwhelming majority of the money and the overwhelming majority of the cases are the result of a voluntary settlement. Now, that's a settlement in the shadow of expectations about what the jury will do if the case ultimately goes to trial. But nonetheless, it's the result of a voluntary agreement between the 2 parties. So the point here is simple. It's important not to fixate on jury verdicts or on the outcome of any particular jury verdict, because the iceberg is the voluntary resolution. A related point, and one we'll talk about at the very end, is a jury verdict is not necessarily equivalent to the amount that's ultimately paid to resolve the case. Okay, there's, I think, quite good evidence that policy limits in many cases serve as a de facto cap on recovery, even if the state in question doesn't have a statutory cap on damages. So insurance, the level of insurance coverage makes a very significant difference. The second point I want to make is that it's common to say, well, there's a cap or there's not a cap, and not realize there's a significant amount of heterogeneity among caps. So Missouri had for a period of time a cap on non-economic damages of $350,000. That was struck down by the Missouri Supreme Court, and they recently enacted another cap that has $400,000 for non-catastrophic cases, $700,000 for catastrophic and death cases. And we've already talked briefly about the Indiana cap, which is $1.25 million on total damages. That actually started originally at $500,000 and then has been bumped up twice to the level that it's now at of $1.25 million. So it's important to recognize a cap is not a cap. You have to look at what it is and how it's designed and try and understand how that design makes a difference in its impact. The last point I want to make is there are certainly healthcare institutions who are being quite proactive about trying to deal with medical errors after they've occurred through what are called communication and resolution programs. So the apology movement that I suspect many of you are familiar with has sort of morphed into a broader attempt to proactively reach out to people that have been injured as a result of a medical error, leaving aside the negligence question, and to try and communicate with them what actually happened, about what's actually been done, and in some instances to offer compensation. And the University of Illinois in Chicago has actually been a leader in this, along with the University of Michigan. So we've said a number of times that, you know, healthcare providers should do better, could do better. It's important to recognize that some of them are attempting to do better after the fact, and our focus for today is trying to get a better job before something bad happens. The last point I want to make, which follows on the frivolous litigation, is it's important to recognize plaintiffs' lawyers, the empirical evidence here is very clear. They very aggressively screen cases. They turn away an overwhelming majority of the people who come to them seeking representation. There are lots of people who are unhappy with their medical care. That doesn't mean they were the victims of malpractice, but they're unhappy enough to go and seek out a plaintiff's lawyer, and it's often the job of the plaintiff's lawyer to turn them away, either because their damages are not large enough to make it a sensible business proposition to take the case, or because it's too hard to prove liability. So the cases that end up going past a very initial screening are cases where someone has decided to invest their own money and time in representing it. It doesn't mean that they're right, that the case involves negligence. They could be wrong. More information could change that. But there's a lot of people who are unhappy with their medical care, not all of whom you end up seeing in the courts. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative McCasey?
Thanks. I have just a couple questions for Ms. Reynolds, and I would thank all the panel members for being here this afternoon. Ms. Reynolds, you mentioned that you had a daughter who was quite young at the time of your diagnosis. I think you said that she was 4 and your son was 13?
Yes.
I just wondered a little bit about what was the impact on your diagnosis at that time on your children, and during the intervening years, how have they coped with your continuing care and treatment and diagnosis?
Well, my 13-year-old is very quiet about it. When I talked to him about it and explained to him, very quiet, didn't really want to talk about it. And he's pretty much still that way. He tells me he's praying for me, but he has a lot of fear inside him because he was a lot older when I went through it the first time, and then it's come back again. My little girl was 4. All she knew was, Mommy's sick. You know, I had to come to treatment for long periods of time, and my husband had to bring her, and occupy her, take care of her while I was in treatment. All she knew was, Mommy is sick. Why don't the doctors just make her better? So she can go to the doctor and he'll make it all better. The harder impact is, my daughter is 15 now, is she's in school and help, and they talk about cancer and how it's very traumatic for her to talk about it and even hear about it now, because now she's older, she understands the problems and what I'm going through. She sees more of what, it's not just Mommy's sick. She sees what's going on with me. And I think the hardest thing for me was for her to ask me, Mommy, am I going to have my breast cut off because my grandma died of breast cancer and you have breast cancer? Am I going to have my breast cut off too? And that's the hardest thing for me, is for her to see me going through everything I'm going through. But she's my rock. She is my rock. My kids are my rock, and so is my husband. But I know they keep a lot of things inside.
Thank you. You also told us about the jury award that you received for $4.5 million, and told us about jurors that were hugging you after that verdict. When did you receive, or rather, when did you realize that award would be capped and understand the amount that you would receive?
Well, my attorney had told me that in the process that there was caps in Missouri. I wasn't really understanding what that really meant as capping it, and until the verdict. I didn't even expect a verdict of $4.5 million. I didn't expect that at all. But when they told me that I was limited, I was confused, because I'm like, how can, if someone else makes a decision saying I was wrongly treated, I was a victim in this, how can somebody that doesn't even know me or know my case take that away from me?
Thank you.
Representative Welch.
Thank you all for being here. Thanks, Madam Chair. Thank you so much for being here today and offering your testimony. Ms. Akers, actually, I do have some questions for you, because I noted, I wrote down a couple of the things that you said that really got me. You know, and as policymakers, I think this body should really understand that. Real lives have been impacted and affected by these medical mistakes. You know, a lot of these something simple went wrong, but real lives were impacted by that something simple. And so I think as a policymaking body, I hope everyone walks away with that. Can you tell us how soon after noticing the mistake did the doctors finally tell you that you in fact did not have breast cancer?
I was called in approximately about a week later. And, you know, again, like back in the day, I didn't really realize, let's be honest, until a medical mistake or anything in life happens to you, you don't really know it exists. Mm-hmm. And so there wasn't anything in my brain other than how much cancer do I have and how terminal am I. So I was at home, I had already had a cancer diagnosis, and I was waiting to figure out where exactly the stage of my second one was. That with, you know, after mastectomies, you have drains, and you have to take care of those, and those are incredibly painful. If anybody's ever known someone or been there himself. So there's all this post-surgical care and physical, but in the other side of my head, I had already had that cancer diagnosis, so I needed to know, where was this? And when you've already been through one diagnosis, you understand the lingo, and the fact that nobody was calling me back was so confusing. So, you know, now I get it. I understand that the hospital was doing their paperwork and getting everything in order, getting all risk management, all the red tape, everything there from the business side. But what nobody ever thought to think about was the fact that there was